still need to find you guys these documents, so hold up just a second. They are around somewhere. Oh, they didn't get. And hopefully some more folks will show up. Sweetie, I can probably hear you singing. Did you hear her? She was only singing a little bit, but definitely singing. Oh, humming. Okay. All right. So let me toss this on Google Classroom. Now, survey for those people who are here. How many DBQs do you think that you need to write in order to maximize your competence before this exam? You can just go ahead and type a number. Just because you type a number doesn't mean I'm going to do it. So, you know, if somebody types 40, that doesn't mean I'm going to assign 40. Just a question. Okay, so you should be able to find this in Google Classroom in just a couple of seconds. And hopefully we've had some other folks show up. It says presentation 2018. Okay, look, there's a bunch of you here. Yay. All right, so okay, so I mean, I don't encourage bad language, but you probably noticed from the classroom that, you know, if you stub your toe and say a bad word, I'm not going to rate you up. So I would say that the same general rule goes here. We're trying to keep it professional, but rare instances, there might be a slightly stronger word that is truly, legitimately, professionally appropriate, or maybe you're quoting a world leader who happened to curse out loud or in a tweet or on a hot mic, in which case, yes, it would be allowed. Okay. Okay, is my mic still cutting out? Oh my goodness. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's open this PowerPoint and go through it page by page. I guess I can shrink my window so I can still see what you're saying even as I'm looking at the PowerPoint. Give me a sec. I could screencast it, but that's just more effort. Wow, Discord's greedy, does not want me to make my screen smaller than a certain size. That's funny. John Green really doesn't say particularly naughty stuff. He says it's not cursing as long as you're talking about donkeys. Which, I mean, is pretty true. All right. All right. You don't see the PowerPoint. Is it just you, or is the PowerPoint really true? Oh, because I had to actually hit post. A long day. Okay. Scootily pooping. Well, honey, you watch Crash Course World History and you'll find out. Yeah, if you don't know what that is, then clearly you didn't watch episode 1. He describes it right at the very beginning of the first episode, and it has very little to do with a bathroom. No, he doesn't talk about it in the intros. No, and it's not behind. I was just doing something else. So who's J. Dodd? Thank you for letting me know. I don't know who you are, though. Oh, is that Jonavi? Okay. So, AP World History Exam DBQ. So let's go to page. We know what a DBQ is. We'll skip that one. So we've got several different documents in front of us. We've got the rubric that we are not at, okay? So real quick, everybody just peruse those documents, maybe like 2 minutes. And then we'll be able to talk intelligently about them. I'm literally not reading you 7 documents. And also, while we're doing this, everybody should pick a favorite document just for fun. I like document 5 because it says, now, as to witchcraft, and I had to read that a couple of times to remember, not witchcraft, as to those certain crafts which. Although no, in all honesty, personally, my favorite is document 7 because he is the water commissioner and he is writing about the structures that basically he helped to engineer. So I think that's pretty cool. Okay, so let's take a look at the thesis point, okay? And this is still the language that the College Board uses, I'm pretty sure. Responds to the prompt with a historically defensible thesis or claim that establishes a line of reasoning. To earn this point, the thesis must make a claim that responds to the prompt rather than restating or rephrasing the prompt. The thesis must consist of one or more sentences located in one place, either in the introduction or the conclusion. So, according to me, and I get to be the dictator in the classroom, right? According to me, your thesis needs to go in your first paragraph. There is the rare person who can construct a fantastic argument and put a thesis at the end and have that work. Chances are really good that that person is not you. So I would like you to figure out your thesis before you start writing. All right. So go ahead and read the purple section there on that page. And yes, after your historical context is perfect. And that's perfect because I think that's the best way to do it. And it's also perfect because that is absolutely the way I taught you to do it. You should start with your historical context, 3 to 4 sentences, and then your thesis, 1 to 2 sentences. So your first paragraph should be about 6 sentences. All right, so questions about this thesis page. Is there, do this so you can just put a thumbs up. So this is a positive, reacts only. Do you need help with thesis statements? And we'll see how many people are there. We might do a separate thesis workshop if there's just a couple of people. So thumbs up only if you need help or clarification with something about thesis writing. And that's like an urgent issue for you that you feel like isn't going to get better if you practice it 5 or 10 times. And if you're shy, you are also welcome to send me a private message. Right, I literally like positive reacts only. No, only if you need help. Okay. So let's take a look at the next slide. This is an example. So we're going to go through this stuff, but I'm not going to do anything special here. So here's an example of a statement written by a student, and you can actually see it written up there, and then the same thing is typed below. Around the dawn of the first millennium, the Han and Roman attitudes towards technology were both self-glorifying. However, the Han Empire in China placed more value upon technology and technological enhancements than did the Roman Empire, as evidenced by the constant concern on the part of the Han dynasty over the occasional indifference on the part of the Romans. So which part of that is the historically defensible claim? And you can unmute yourself and just tell us. I mean, or you can type. I mean, Olivia, we could, but it's kind of sexist. All right, so the part where they said the Han Empire in China placed more value upon technology and technological enhancements than did the Roman Empire. Yes, that is correct. That is the historically defensible statement. And you can see that it's really right in the middle of that. If you think it would help you, you could underline your historically defensible statement so you can look back at it every now and again and try to remember what on earth you're supposed to be writing about anyways. So, partition A is that Han and Roman attitudes were both self-glorifying. Oh my gosh, literally my daughter wanted to know what scootily pooping was, and she just turned to me with episode 1 of Crash Course World History with the Mongols saying they're the exception. And she was like, hey, look. So that happened. Okay, so partition A is the first part of the first sentence. Partition B, as evidenced by the constant concern on the part of the Han dynasty, and then I would say part C, over the occasional indifference on the part of the Romans. He's fine. Okay. Questions about that? Do you think that one, that is young Krause. We both have cool names. We've been over this. Okay. So, do you think that this thesis gets the point? I love how Sushuth pretends that it's like not one of the many Russian princesses who dies. Wait, was that her? Did you hear her? She made some noise. I'm sure there was another Princess Anastasia at some point. Okay, so I would give this thesis statement the point. I mean, the one the Bolsheviks killed doesn't really narrow it down. They killed a lot of people. Yeah, I think it would get the point. All right. Okay, so here's another one. Yes, the royal family that the Bolsheviks killed. Yes, that one. I mean, she's not named after that one, but it's the same name. Okay, so here's another thesis. While both the Romans and the Hans appreciated the use of technology towards the improvement of water regulation, the Romans concentrated more intently on mathematical and science advancements, looking down upon the laboring, tools-related inventions that were appreciated by the Han. As the Romans increased their slave labor force, the intellectuals cared little about making the work easier for the slaves. This led them to focus more on science and math advancement. The Han, however, relied heavily on agriculture, and although they held a centralized government, a feudalism system held a slight presence. This promoted technological advancement in tools that would increase production. Plus or minus here, does that get the point? So right now, Liam, we're talking about the thesis point. Although, hypothetically, maybe there's some context there too. We can take a look at it. Yeah, so there was a discussion about the College Board and the grading last night on the Facebook group, and while they swear that they don't grade it, they swear that they don't perv it, anecdotally, all of the people who have ever graded AP exams seem to think that that is really not true. And apparently what they came out and said, it's like whatever point they decide on, which they're not going to decide how many points are required until after it's written. Because, I mean, what happens if the question is really hard? I mean, honestly, guys, sometimes this happens. Like, if I write a question, like by hand, just me, or I give an essay topic that makes perfect, sometimes it doesn't make sense to the students, and people do bad because the prompt doesn't make sense. If that's the case, and nobody's getting 9s and 10s, and really the high scores are like 6s and 7s, then it would be unreasonable for us to decide today, not knowing what the question is going to be, that a 5 is the minimum. Does that make sense? So they're definitely really truly not going to decide until probably after they read the first 1,000 or so essays. They go through and they try to figure out what kinds of answers are students getting, what's going to count, what's going to not count, etc. But they also seem to have indicated that whatever number they set it at, if 100% of the students get that number, then 100% of the students pass the exam, which has certainly never been how it's been before, but yeah. Okay, so back to this thesis statement. I do think that this one gets the point, the point, singular. So the assertion is, the Romans, this led them, meaning the Romans, to focus more on science and math advancements. The Han, however, relied heavily on agriculture. And then partitions would be the thing after the agriculture, the promotion of technology that would increase production. And then there were other partitions up at the top where they talk about they both have an appreciation of technology, plus the Romans had this emphasis on mathematics and science in a way that sort of looked down upon the working class. Okay, so I say that this one definitely gets the point. Next page, this is slide 14. And then down at the bottom, so this is the same student still. Both the Han and Roman societies had a clear appreciation for technological advancements despite the differences in areas where the technological attention was focused. Okay, so let's take a look again real quick. I'm going to go back up, way up to the top, and I'm going to... Okay, so the prompt is at the top on slide 2. So let's go back and look at that, or I'll just read it to you. Using the documents provided and your knowledge of world history, analyze Han and Roman attitudes towards technology. So this would be a compare and contrast question. And it does seem like that second student has set up a Romans did this and Han did that, and this is how they were similar and this is how they were different. Now remind me, what do you remember about what I said about compare and contrast questions? How many partitions should you have for a compare and contrast question or a similarities and differences question? So 3 is probably ideal because you're going to want at least 1 similarity and 2 differences, or 1 difference and 2 similarities. You could have 4. You could do 2 of each, but just remember that would make your essay longer. So 3 is really sort of the minimum, though. Right. So let's take a look now at slide 15. The classical civilizations of Han, China, and Rome had very differently defined views as it came to technology. While Han, China saw technology as necessary to economize life, Romans saw technology as unneeded and no substitute for hard work and manual labor. Okay. What do you guys think? Olivia says that doesn't get the point. Angela says she doesn't think so. Liam says, but wait, there's more. Yeah, this is another example of something attempting a thesis point. So the first sentence here is pointless. You can just cross the first sentence out. The classical civilizations of Han, China, and Rome had very differently defined views as it came to technology. That is literally a waste of space. That's literally a waste of space. The second sentence, so this person has a defensible historical statement that says, while Han, China saw technology, and Liam, we're on slide 15, and anybody else who happens to not be on slide 15, we are now on slide 15. The classical civilization, blah, blah. Okay, while Han, China saw technology as necessary to economize life, okay, part one, I am not sure what economize life means. Romans saw technology as unneeded and no substitute for hard work and manual labor. And I'm back with Olivia and says, well, that's just wrong. Obviously, the Romans were into technology. And they certainly distinguished between engineers and manual laborers, but they're not suggesting that engineers are not a substitute for manual laborers. Right, so this one doesn't get the point. All right. Well, so Cole, I think this is what happens when somebody gets a prompt that deals with something that they really don't understand very well. And really, even the College Board says it has to be a historically defensible statement. That's where I came up with that phrase, is I took it from the College Board, because I'm teaching you how to do it the College Board way. Right, so contextualization describes a broader historical context relevant to the prompt. Well, I'm glad they were so detailed in that description. But the second part, from this point, the response must relate the topic of the prompt to broader historical events, developments, or processes that occur before, during, or continue after the time frame in question. This point is not awarded for merely a phrase or a reference, which is why I tell you you need at least 3 sentences. And most of the time, people earn the point at the end of sentence 3, or maybe in sentence 4. All right, so let's take a look. Skip the purple part. You can go back and read this. The short answer is that I am telling you to put this in the first paragraph and, in fact, start with it. So yeah, and that second point, the question prompt can't be your examples for your context. So if the question is about Han and Rome, China, your context can't be about Han and Rome, China. Does that make sense? You could talk about it maybe, you could maybe talk about previously what happened in China, but you definitely couldn't talk about Han and Rome. Does that make sense? Or you couldn't talk about Han and Rome during this time frame. Let's see. Let's see what Liam has. So I'm not, it could be a context thing, but I'm not really sure how that sets us up to understand. I'm sure you could go into more detail. I'm not sure it sets us up to understand whatever your thesis is going to be, right? And that really only speaks to the Rome part of the question. Okay, so let's evaluate some statements. Slide 18. Technology is something that has been used throughout human history and especially during the classical period. Long before the Han and Roman civilizations appeared, we see technology in use in such areas as Africa, with the Egyptian use of mathematics to build monumental structures like pyramids. Later on, we see technology being used by the Persians in their wars against the Greeks. We know that the Romans adapted many of these technical ideas from the Greeks as well. Does that get the point? Yeah, absolutely. That one would get the point. It does a nice job. It talks about some other civilizations. It is specific. Like if they had just said technology in other areas such as Africa and also by the Persians, it would not have gotten the point. All right. We're going to skip the little evidence thing there because it is now different. Do we have questions about using the documents as evidence, though? Correct. You are not supposed to directly quote them. And Steve Heimler will tell you that as well, that the readers know what the documents say. It is absolutely not necessary, and it is a big fat waste of time. Well, that's okay. That's why we're learning, Liam. English teachers want you to quote everything, and if you're writing a history research paper, I want you to quote everything. But on a DBQ for the College Board, the readers read those documents 1,000 times a day, so you really don't need to. It's a big fat waste of time. Spend more time telling us about the Gracchi brothers, you know? Yes, so you just paraphrase, and all you really need to say is document 1 suggests or document 1 demonstrates. And then you paraphrase and you analyze. So truth, those are fighting words. Okay, let's move on to, let's look at slide 22. So this is talking about sourcing. Don't, Danny. Okay, so there are 4 ways to source. I mentioned this. Okay, come on. Pay attention to me over here. What is it, Stan? I am the star of the show? Okay, so HIP. I mentioned this to a couple of the small groups. Some people also put it HAP, for historical context, intended audience, purpose. And that's not actually how. What did I say earlier? Was anybody listening to me? There we go. Perspective of author. I was like, I knew I didn't say point of view. Okay, sweet. So if you missed this, or if I happened to not mention that acronym, you might want to write it down. Maybe that would be a good index card to tape next to your computer screen for the next 4 weeks, so that you can remember how to source documents. And again, remember, you can do this with anything. Turn on the news, watch the blonde ladies on Fox, watch the president, watch Andy. There are so many good things where you can be like, what is the historical context? Oh, the historical context is a global pandemic that some people still say isn't any worse than the flu. Who is the intended audience? I do think that the why was for why. Although I feel like purpose gets at why. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these. So historical context of a source, you're thinking about before, and we're on slide 23 now. Sue's Truth and Liam, I'm going to have to ask you to take this outside when you're allowed to be closer than 6 feet together, which is not now. Right. 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 So she's like, catch me on DM. You should make a meme. Since like we can't cash you outside, cash you on DM. Think before, during, and after the document to situate it in its historical context and consider the influences on the production or writing of this source. So, for instance, another feature of historical context for when Donald Trump gives his press conference at 6:00. Are you guys watching those? They're really something. Mr. Krause insists on watching them, and yeah, I would recommend. I would say that Andy is better for your mental health. And actually, like, I think that's a great, like, if this were a DBQ, I would totally source the Trump press briefing excerpt and the Andy press briefing excerpt in the same paragraph. I would consider the historical context, but I would say that I really think, like, my best historical assessment is that Andy's goal really is to keep Kentuckians from dying, and Donald Trump's goal does not necessarily, like, his number one priority does not specifically seem to continue to be keeping Americans alive. I'm not suggesting that he wants Americans dead. He keeps getting off topic, and the topic that he especially gravitates to is how this isn't his fault. Okay? So yeah. Lima. That's the best. Oh my gosh. Okay, you guys are killing me. So a comparison with other events in different time periods. Not when you're sourcing a document. Okay, when you're doing context for your big context point up in the first paragraph, yes. When you're doing the historical context of a document, no. Oh, I do love this making our way into our feed. Okay, next slide, on to 24, for those of you following along with me and the slideshow at home and not our friends who are entertaining us. What's the intended audience of the source? Think who is supposed to read, hear, or see the source? What is the expected audience intended to do afterwards? Okay, the Kermit one is literally my favorite. That is definitely the best one. And then after they read, see, or hear this source, right? So depending on what Trump has said that day, maybe the American people are supposed to go get hydroxychloroquine, right? And after people listen to Andy, we're supposed to go put green lights on our porch and be kind and respectful and stay 6 feet away from people and not use social distancing as an excuse to get together with people. All right. Right. Andy wants people to do the right thing. And actually, his messaging has been incredibly consistent. Okay. What's the purpose of this document? Is this all boring review? Like, is there anybody here who's not? Is this boring review? I spelled boring wrong. So thumbs up if this is like so simple that you're like, ooh. The sourcing is simple. You know, that's what I thought until I looked at student scores on sourcing, and then I was like, apparently this is not as simple as I thought it was. Okay, so what's the author's purpose? Again, I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, Liam. But the who, what, when, where, why, and then, yeah, what does the author hope to have happen after the action? We had a lot of good discussions about, good discussions, especially about the Ho Chi Minh document yesterday and today. And then the author's point of view, so this is where maybe their nationality, their religion, their ethnicity, their age, etc., is when does that become relevant, right? Like, does it matter whether Karen is, you know, worried about her roots showing versus does it matter if Karen's upset because her mom lives in a nursing home and she is really sad she doesn't get to see her, right? So like that why matters. Why is Karen protesting right now? I really feel really bad for people named Karen. Okay, let's see if this one gets the point. If Karen goes on to commit a historical event. Well, let's hope that Karen doesn't commit a historical event like giving coronavirus to lots of people. Gosh, this is such a weird, hard time in the world. Okay, so let's see. Slide 27. Document 4 continues ever anticipating this self-glorying as it sings the praises of Tushi. However, this document questions it is government-sponsored around the same time the Han lost the mandate of heaven. Of course it glorifies the technology introduced under the Han. They need everyone to still support the Han. Does this get the point? So, thumbs up and thumbs down. Agreed. I think this gets the point. It's not well written. Right? Like I got lost like twice in what he was trying to say or she was trying to say while I was reading it. It's not well written, but did we get at what the goal of the document is? Yes. The Han want to keep the mandate of heaven, and this is supposed to help them do it. Okay, Esther, that is a fantastic question. And I will say that one weakness of this particular presentation format, and in fact, I did not make this. This is made by a guy called Paul Filio, who usually comes and actually teaches a class on DBQs for me, and then he actually scores them because he's a real scorer. This is something that he made. So since we can't see the thesis, we can't actually directly confirm that this particular one is going to directly support the thesis. But I guess really, that this is useful in the sense of, I guess, in all honesty, I guess whether or not they get the point is going to be dependent on what their thesis is. But if their thesis says that they were more careful and more appreciative of the technology, then the idea of glorifying the technology specifically for the purpose of continuing to support the government still does support that thesis statement. The other thing is that I guess what they don't want you to do, like that idea that it's supposed to connect to the argument, what they don't want you to do is be like, well, and also when Karen wrote this document, she was blonde. I mean, right, like that might be a true statement, but knowing that she needed her roots done and she was blonde really isn't super significant to the argument. And plus you already knew she was blonde because her name was Karen. But you really want to get at like the why would the writer use this and how is knowing why the writer is doing this essential to understanding how the document itself supports my argument. Right? So for instance, maybe in a different universe where the prompt is a little bit different, but the student sources the document the same way. Say that the prompt is asking you to evaluate the way in which the disrespect of technology contributed to the fall of the Han. Then this document, where they're really sort of glorifying it, is going to be something that is part of a counter argument, but not part of a general argument. Does that make sense? Like, I guess you can still indicate that you don't understand the role of this document by sourcing it incorrect. Does that make sense? But in all honesty, really and truly, you probably do need to see the thesis. But like, this is such a good statement about that document that it's hard to imagine a world where they're not going to get that point. Commit a historical event. We commit historical events every day, in fact. Most of us are just blissfully unaware of it. Okay. I mean, good. Good, you guys followed my instructions. Okay, so next one, where Frentius goes on and on about the Roman aqueducts, declaring them better than the pyramids. Can anyone say egotistical maniac? However, this prideful view of the aqueducts comes from a water commissioner for the city of Rome. Of course he paints the aqueducts as the best thing before sliced bread. His job is to bring water to Rome. Part of his income depends on the aqueducts being marvelous Roman inventions. If he said the aqueducts were bad, he'd probably lose his job, so his opinions at best are questionable. Well, okay, so it is way too casual. But they're not necessarily going to take points off if they can tell what you mean. And yes, I would say that the phrase egotistical maniac probably doesn't belong in this. Well, okay, but you can't dock points for that because there isn't a point for does the student maintain a professional and academic tone. Yeah, so it does get the point. This definitely provides at least one plausible explanation of why this guy is so hype about these aqueducts. So yeah, so he's technically not wrong. And assumably, if this is an example of one that gets the point, then this is probably being used to substantiate Romans had a really big appreciation for engineering and mathematics or something somewhere along those. Okay. Oh, this is the one with the student with really good writing. Okay, so we're going to start with document 4. Document 4 can also be viewed as having a slight bias. However, in contrast to document 2, its bias is towards the government, namely the governor Tushy. This bias is evident because the source is sponsored by the government, and consequently, only good things will be said about Tushy's accomplishments. This provides doubt as to how much the Han people really appreciated the technology used to make advancements with agricultural tools. Okay, so I like that. I would imagine then that maybe this student has already discussed document 2. Although if the student has not discussed document 2, go ahead and finish saying whatever has to be done about document 2. And then you could, or excuse me, document 4, and then you could circle back and say document 2 is biased against the government because it suggests blah, 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 blah. So that's an example, like I've been talking about in the small groups, that's an example of how you can source 2 documents in contrast to one another. So this one, pro-bias, pro-government slant, and this one has an anti-government slant. And we can see that here in document 4, and then over here you can see this other thing in document 2. So your analysis is more complex. You've evaluated 2 documents. You've hopefully used them to substantiate your argument, and you just forced 2 of them, all in one paragraph that is way less than half a page. Yes, and poison pipes would be a good thing to talk about. For something along these lines. I'm trying to think if there's a case where you could talk about poison pipes and bring in both Rome and Flint, Michigan as outside evidence. I can't think of a prompt that would call for that, but those are cases where people got poisoned because of the infrastructure. Although, interestingly, the people who got poisoned in Flint were poor, and the people who got poisoned in Rome were rich, which would be an interesting dichotomy to talk about. All right. Complex argument. I am literally not going to read that to you, but you can totally read slide 30 all on your own to try and go for that complexity point. That is not where we're going to be putting our energy. Okay, so DBQ strategies. We're on slide 31 now, and we are almost done. Heaven, thank you. Okay, so use bullet points beginning of the question as a checklist. They're not going to actually give you that beautiful rubric that they publish online. I honestly don't know why not. Usually in the book they have these bullet points that are put there. However, you're not necessarily going to have that. So I would find an iteration of the rubric that you like. If it's not one of the ones I've shared, you are welcome to run it by me and be like, is this accurate? But by the time we're done with this, we probably should be able to tell whether or not it's accurate. The most important thing you need to make sure you do is respond to the prompt, right? Steve Heimler was talking about that. It doesn't matter how beautiful your essay is. If you don't answer the damn question, you're not getting any points. I mean, or maybe you lose the thesis point, but you get like 1 point for discussing documents as related to the prompt. But really, if you ignore the prompt, you can't even get that point. And then the DBQ strategies on the last page. Angela, I'll get back to your question in a sec. On the last page, it has some more tips, and all of those tips are specific for the non-2020 rubric. But right, you know that you need to source 2 documents, so please source at least 3. You know that you need to use at least 4 documents, so please use all 5. It's fairly simple. You know, you need to have some information and some specific historical information in your context, so do that. You know you have a chance to get 2 outside evidence points. Maybe just toss in a 3rd one if you have time, because that's like an insurance policy. Okay, so, and Angela's question/statement about struggling of not how to do something with a nice style, they don't care about your style. They care about whether or not your argument is coherent. It doesn't matter if it's poorly expressed, as long as they can understand what you said and it makes sense. It does not have to be beautiful. Like, they get it. They get that this is your most extreme rough draft, and you would not turn in this nonsense to Miss Pickle, right, at the end of seminar. That would not be okay. But this isn't seminar, right? They want to see if you can do these historical skills. I know, I understand. I like beautiful writing too, but really the English nerd in you should be happier once you realize that the purpose-driven writing is the most, like, has the highest level of efficacy, right? So if the purpose of your writing is to write something beautiful, then for the love of God, write something beautiful. But if your purpose is to get a good score on an exam that's going to get you, you know, $3,000 worth of college credits, then go ahead and just do the thing that's going to earn you the points and write a poem when you get home. I mean, even scientists sometimes struggle with that, right? Like, your science report doesn't have to be beautiful. It has to be coherent. It's nice if it has a good flow. Fantastic if you can make it a little more interesting than it would be simply based on the facts, but it doesn't have to. It has to contain the fact. So that is my little lesson on basic DBQ stuff. What questions do we have? Do we feel like we have the basics covered? Let's do a little survey. Basics covered, yes or no? Thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, is there anybody who is floundering and desperate and you're like, thank you for doing this, but I still have no clue what the F I'm doing? Yeah, we'll be done in 5 minutes. And I can't do Protobol right now, but we'll get it one of these days. Maybe. Okay, so nobody seems to have any burning, desperate questions. If you have a burning, desperate question, or your statement is literally, Ms. Krause, I still have no idea what's going on, and you're starting to act like you expect me to know, you do your homework on Friday afternoons. I mean, not that it matters that it's Friday, right? Saturday's good too. Just not right now when I've been doing this for 1,000,000 hours today. Of course. the homework's due Friday night, so you have to do it Friday afternoon. That was a dumb question on my part. Yeah, time doesn't exist anymore. I really have like this weird feeling that I'm like, it's not like a pessimistic feeling. It's just very surreal. Like, wow, I used to have friends and I used to drive places and go and do things. But now, like, am I ever going to see my friends again? Like, I feel like I probably will at some point, but like, I can't imagine a reality where it's okay to go outside and be within 6 people. We definitely can't let Andy down. Oh my gosh, Andy's on in 3 minutes. Truth, I had a student who decided at some point during his junior year that he was no longer Hindu, and he had a hamburger the first time for his senior year, and he was pretty amazed. And I was just like, wow, I can't believe you just shared that with me. Like, that's pretty intense, actually. All right. Well, I'm going to go. You guys can continue to play or to fight or do whatever it is that you're going to do. Have desperate questions. Please let me know what they are. Roman's got big brained. Right. No. I really don't think Chipotle is good. Go to California. That's where the good Mexican food is, but not until all this is done because Andy says so. Okay. Bye, guys. Have a good day.